I never thought a night that started with so much pride could end in a nightmare. The Grand Horizon Hotel in downtown San Francisco was a glittering spectacle, its massive chandelier casting a golden glow over the hundreds of guests at Tech Nova's annual company gala. The air buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the smooth melodies of a live jazz band. Everyone was dressed to the nines, women in shimmering evening gowns, men in sharp tuxedos, but I felt out of place in my old black suit, the one I'd only worn once before. On our wedding day 8 years ago. I'm not a gala guy. I'm a software engineer who prefers quiet nights at home with a beer and a good book. But tonight, I was here for Sarah, my wife. She was being honored, and I wanted to be the supportive husband she deserved. Sarah looked breathtaking in her wine-red gown, the fabric hugging her curves in a way that made my heart skip a beat. "You look amazing, babe," I whispered as we walked into the main ballroom, arm in arm. She gave me a quick smile, but her eyes were elsewhere, scanning the crowd like she was searching for someone. I brushed it off. She's nervous, I told myself. This is her night to shine. Tech Nova, the tech giant where Sarah worked, knew how to throw a party. The ballroom was a sea of elegance. Long tables draped in white linen, centerpieces of white orchids, and a massive stage where the awards ceremony would take place. Sarah had been nominated for Employee of the Year, a big deal for her. She'd been working late nights for months, pouring her heart into her career, and I'd always supported her, even when it meant less time together. Tonight, I was proud of her, prouder than I'd ever been. The ceremony began after a lavish dinner of seared salmon and roasted vegetables. When Sarah's name was called, the room erupted in applause. She walked up to the stage with that confident stride I'd always admired, her smile radiant under the spotlight. "Thank you, everyone," she began, her voice steady and captivating. "I owe this to my incredible team, my mentor and boss, Richard Bennett, and my husband, Mike, for always supporting me." The crowd clapped again, and I smiled, clapping along, though her mention of me felt like an afterthought. Her eyes didn't meet mine. They lingered on Richard, her boss, a tall, imposing man in his mid-40s with salt and pepper hair and a smug smile that always rubbed me the wrong way. I pushed the unease down. She's just grateful, I told myself. That's all. After her speech, Sarah came back to our table, her award, a sleek glass trophy, clutched in her hands. "I'm so proud of you," I said, reaching for her hand. She gave me a distracted smile, her eyes darting back to the stage. "Thanks, honey. I need to step away for a bit. Richard wants to talk about a new project. I'll be right back, okay?" Her tone was light, but there was a hurried edge to it. I nodded, though I didn't like it. "Sure, but don't take too long," I said, trying to sound casual. She leaned in, kissed my cheek quickly, and disappeared into the crowd, her red gown trailing behind her like a flame. I sat there, sipping my wine, trying to enjoy the music, but the minutes stretched on. 10 minutes turned into 20, and Sarah still wasn't back. My stomach twisted with unease. I'm not the jealous type, or at least, I never thought I was, but something felt off. She'd been distant lately, always working late, always on her phone, always talking about Richard like he was some kind of genius. I tried to shake it off, but the longer she was gone, the harder it was to ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. I stood up, deciding to stretch my legs, maybe find her myself. As I walked toward the bar to grab another drink, I overheard 2 young employees whispering nearby. "Did you see Sarah?" one of them said, a smirk in her voice. "She went up to the VIP room on the 18th floor with Richard." The other laughed softly. "Yeah, that's where he takes his special projects. If you know what I mean." They stopped talking when they noticed me, but the damage was done. My heart pounded in my chest, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. It couldn't be true. It couldn't, but I had to know. I made my way to the elevator, my legs moving on autopilot, my mind racing with 1,000 horrible possibilities. The elevator ride to the 18th floor felt like an eternity, each ding of the floors passing like a hammer on my nerves. The hallway was eerily quiet, the muffled sounds of the gala below barely audible. I found the door labeled VIP Suite at the end of the hall, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. I told myself I was overreacting, that I'd walk in and find Sarah and Richard discussing spreadsheets or something equally innocent. But deep down, I knew better. I pushed the door open, and the sight before me hit me like a freight train. There, in the dimly lit room, was Sarah, my Sarah, sitting on Richard's lap, her arms around his neck, their lips locked in a passionate kiss. A glass of champagne sat on the table beside them, and Sarah's award trophy lay forgotten on the floor. The room spun around me, my breath catching in my throat. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't process what I was seeing. Sarah must have heard the door, because she pulled back suddenly, her eyes wide with shock. "Mike?" she gasped, scrambling off Richard's lap, her gown slipping off one shoulder as she stood. The champagne glass on the table tipped over, shattering on the hardwood floor with a sharp crack. Richard didn't even flinch. He just leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips, and said, "You should knock, Mike. Didn't your mother teach you manners?" I wanted to punch that smug look off his face, but I couldn't move. My feet felt glued to the floor, my chest tight with a pain I'd never known before. Sarah rushed toward me, her face pale, her hand shaking. "Mike, please." "It's not what you think," she stammered, her voice breaking. "Let me explain, please." But I couldn't hear her over the roaring in my ears. My wife was in another man's arms, kissing him like I didn't exist. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of love, trust, and sacrifice, shattered in a single moment. I turned and walked out, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. Sarah's voice followed me down the hallway, desperate and pleading. "Mike, wait. I can explain. Please, don't go." I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I needed to get out, to breathe, to make sense of the betrayal that was tearing me apart. But as I reached the elevator, something inside me snapped. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't let her get away with this. Not in front of everyone who'd just clapped for her, praised her, called her a star. If she wanted to play dirty, I'd play dirtier. I stormed back to the main ballroom, my heart pounding with a mix of rage and heartbreak. The gala was still in full swing, the crowd laughing and dancing, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I spotted the MC on stage, introducing the next award. Without thinking, I marched up, grabbed the microphone from his hand, and turned to face the room. The music stopped, and every eye turned to me. Confusion spreading across their faces. "Everyone, I have something to say," I began, my voice shaking but loud enough to echo through the ballroom. Sarah, who had just run back into the room, froze at the edge of the crowd, her face white as a ghost. "Sarah Harrison, your Employee of the Year, isn't who you think she is. She didn't earn that award with hard work. She earned it by sleeping with her boss, Richard Bennett." I just caught them together in the VIP room. The room went deathly silent for a split second, then erupted into gasps and whispers. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, her hands covering her mouth as she shook her head, mouthing, "No, no, no." Richard, who had slipped back into the room unnoticed, turned and walked out, his face a mask of indifference. I didn't care. Let him run. Let the whole world know what they'd done. I dropped the mic, the sound of it hitting the stage echoing like a gunshot, and walked out of the ballroom, my chest heaving, my world in pieces. Sarah's sobs followed me, but I didn't look back. Not tonight. Not ever. The morning after the gala felt like waking up in a nightmare I couldn't escape. My head pounded from the whiskey I'd downed at the motel bar. But the alcohol couldn't dull the image burned into my mind. Sarah, my wife of 8 years, sitting on Richard's lap, her lips locked with his in a way I hadn't felt in years. The betrayal wasn't just a stab in the heart. It was 1,000 knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. I'd packed a single suitcase and left our apartment at dawn. Unable to bear the sight of our shared life, the framed photos of us on our honeymoon in Hawaii, the coffee mugs we'd bought together at a flea market, the bed we'd made love in. That bed was tainted now, a symbol of her infidelity, and I couldn't stand to be near it. I checked into a rundown motel on the edge of San Francisco. The kind of place where the neon sign flickered and the carpet smelled of stale cigarette smoke. The room was small and dingy, with peeling wallpaper and a mattress that creaked under my weight. But it was better than facing Sarah. My phone buzzed incessantly with her calls, each one a fresh wave of agony. I couldn't bring myself to answer. But I couldn't stop myself from listening to her voicemails either. "Mike, please. I'm so sorry." Her voice cracked through the speaker, raw with tears. "I made a terrible mistake. I love you. Please. Let's talk. Don't shut me out." I deleted the message, my hands shaking, but the words echoed in my head. Love? If she loved me, how could she do this? How could she throw away everything we had for a promotion for him? By Monday, the video of my outburst at the gala had gone viral. Some Technova employee had recorded the whole thing, me grabbing the mic, my voice shaking as I exposed Sarah's affair with Richard in front of hundreds of people. She earned that award by sleeping with her boss, Richard Bennett, I'd said, and the gasps from the crowd still rang in my ears. The video had over 1 million views now. The comments section a battlefield of opinions. What a scumbag, one user wrote. Poor guy, he didn't deserve this, another said. She's a gold digger, hope he divorces her, a third chimed in. I couldn't read them for long. Each comment was a reminder of my humiliation, a public dissection of my pain. Technova reacted swiftly. Sarah was suspended pending an investigation into unprofessional conduct, and Richard issued a statement through his PR team, claiming he was committed to maintaining high ethical standards while denying any wrongdoing. It made my blood boil. He thought he could get away with this, hide behind his money and power, while I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. Sarah's suspension didn't satisfy me either. She deserved worse. They both did. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, not just with Sarah's calls, but with messages from friends, family, even strangers who'd seen the video. My sister, Emily, drove up from San Jose to check on me, banging on the motel door until I let her in. Mike. What the hell is going on? She demanded, her eyes wide with concern as she took in the state of the room. Empty whiskey bottles on the nightstand, my unwashed clothes strewn across the floor. You look like a wreck. Come stay with me. You don't have to go through this alone. I can't, Em, I said, my voice hoarse. I need to deal with this my way. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hand reaching for mine, but I pulled away. I didn't want her pity. I didn't want anyone's pity. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make Sarah and Richard feel the same pain I was feeling. Emily stayed for an hour, trying to convince me to leave the motel, but I refused. When she finally left, I felt more alone than ever. A week later, I agreed to meet Sarah at a coffee shop downtown. I don't know why I went. Maybe I needed to see her face, to hear her admit what she'd done, to confirm that the woman I loved was truly gone. The shop was crowded. The hum of conversation and the clatter of coffee cups a stark contrast to the storm inside me. Sarah was already there, sitting at a corner table, her face pale and drawn, her eyes red from crying. She looked like a ghost of the woman I'd watched on that stage, the confident, radiant Sarah who'd captivated the room. Now, she was a wreck. Her hands trembling as she clutched a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Mike, she whispered as I sat down, her voice barely audible. Thank you for coming. I didn't respond, just stared at her, waiting. I didn't want her gratitude. I wanted answers. She took a shaky breath, her eyes darting away from mine. I don't know where to start. I'm so sorry, Mike. I never meant for this to happen. Richard, he made me feel like I had to keep my job, to get ahead. It started with late-night meetings, then dinners, and then. I don't know how it got so far. Her voice broke, tears streaming down her face. I thought I was doing it for us, for our future. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. I stared at her, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. For us? I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. You humiliated me, Sarah. You threw away our marriage for a promotion. Don't you dare say it was for us. She flinched, her hands twisting the napkin in her lap into a tight knot. I know I messed up, she sobbed. I know I hurt you. But I was scared, Mike. Richard, he has so much power at Technova. He made me think I'd lose everything if I didn't give him what he wanted. Her words were like gasoline on the fire inside me. So you chose him over me? I snapped, my voice rising loud enough that the people at the next table turned to look. You chose your career over our marriage? Over 8 years of love, of trust, of everything we built together? She sobbed harder, her shoulders shaking, but I didn't stop. Did you ever love me, Sarah? Or was I just convenient? Someone to keep you grounded while you chased your dreams? Of course I loved you, she cried, reaching for my hand across the table. I yanked my hand back, the touch of her skin burning me like acid. I still love you, Mike. I made a horrible mistake. But I want to fix this. Please, give me a chance. I'll quit Technova. I'll do anything. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor with a harsh screech. You don't get to fix this, I said, my voice shaking with rage. You broke us, Sarah. You broke me. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me at the door. Mike, wait, she called, her voice desperate. There's something else. I'm pregnant. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. What did you say? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She looked down, her hands clutching her stomach, tears dripping onto the table. I'm pregnant, she repeated, her voice trembling. I found out last week. I don't know. I don't know if it's yours or Richard's. The room tilted around me, the edges of my vision darkening. Pregnant. My wife, the woman I'd loved. The woman who'd betrayed me, was pregnant, and she didn't even know if the child was mine. I felt like I was going to be sick. You're disgusting, I spat, my voice thick with disgust. Don't ever contact me again. I stormed out of the coffee shop, her sobs fading behind me, but the weight of her words clung to me like a shadow. I drove aimlessly for hours. The city lights blurring through the tears I couldn't hold back anymore. Pregnant. The word echoed in my mind, each repetition a fresh wave of agony. If the child was mine, what did that mean? Could I ever look at Sarah again, knowing what she'd done? And if it was Richard's? I couldn't even finish the thought. The uncertainty was a knife twisting in my chest. And I knew I couldn't let this go. I couldn't let them walk away while I drowned in this pain. That night, alone in my motel room, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. I wasn't going to let Sarah and Richard destroy me and move on with their lives. I'd make them pay, both of them. I didn't know how yet, but I knew I'd find a way. The fire inside me burned hotter than ever, fueled by rage, betrayal, and a desperate need for justice. They'd regret the day they crossed me. The next few weeks were a haze of anger and determination. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything except Sarah's betrayal and the bomb she dropped on me. Pregnant. The word haunted me, a constant reminder of the life we'd had and the life she'd stolen from me. I didn't know if the baby was mine, but the uncertainty was eating me alive. I needed answers. And I needed revenge. I started by hiring a private investigator named Tony, a gruff ex-cop with a reputation for digging up dirt. I met him at a diner across town. The smell of greasy bacon and burnt coffee filling the air. I need dirt on Richard Bennett, I told him, sliding a photo of Richard across the table. He's the CEO of Technova. He's been sleeping with my wife, and I want to ruin him. I also need to know everything about Sarah, how long this has been going on, what else she's hiding. Tony raised an eyebrow, his weathered face unreadable. Technova's a big fish, he said, taking a sip of his coffee. But I'll see what I can find. This'll get messy, you know that, right? I nodded. I'm counting on it. Tony worked fast, and within 10 days, he had a file that made my blood run cold. He met me at the diner again, sliding a thick manila envelope across the table. You're not gonna like this, he warned, his voice gruff. I opened the file, my hand shaking, and what I saw inside was worse than I'd imagined. Richard had a history of predatory behavior, affairs with at least 4 other subordinates over the past decade, all of whom had left Technova after signing NDAs in exchange for payouts. There were emails between Richard and Sarah, some dating back 8 months, 2 months longer than Sarah had admitted. Meet me at the Ritz tonight, one email from Richard read. Wear that red dress I like. My stomach churned as I read her reply. Can't wait, darling. Mike thinks I'm at a team meeting. But the real bombshell was the financial records Tony had uncovered. Richard had been embezzling money from Technova for years, funneling millions into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands under the guise of consulting fees. There were bank statements, wire transfers, even a recorded phone call where Richard bragged to a friend about playing the system. It was enough to not only destroy his career, but send him to prison for a long time. Sarah's file was just as damning. Tony had found hotel receipts, late-night texts, even a photo of her and Richard at a restaurant, laughing over a candlelit dinner while I was at home, waiting for her. She told me she was at a conference that weekend, but the truth was staring me in the face. She'd been with him, living a double life while I played the fool. There was also a medical record Tony had somehow obtained, a confirmation of her pregnancy, dated the day before our meeting at the coffee shop. She'd known, and she'd still lied to my face, claiming she'd just found out. I slammed the file shut, my hands trembling with rage. What do you want to do with this? Tony asked, his tone neutral. You've got enough here to bury them both. I didn't hesitate. I want to go public, I said, my voice hard. I want the world to know what they've done. And I want Richard in jail. Tony nodded. But there was a flicker of concern in his eyes. Be careful, Mike. People like Richard don't go down without a fight. And your wife, she's not going to take this lying down either. I didn't care. I was past the point of caution. I wanted blood. I contacted a journalist named Rachel, a fierce reporter at a major tech publication known for exposing corporate scandals. We met at a quiet cafe in the Mission District, the file tucked under my arm. I've got a story for you, I said, sliding the envelope across the table. Richard Bennett, CEO of Technova, has been having an affair with my wife, Sarah Harrison. He's also been embezzling money from the company, millions of dollars. I've got proof of everything. Rachel's eyes lit up as she flipped through the file, her fingers lingering on the bank statements. This is explosive, she said, her voice sharp with excitement. If this checks out, it's going to be huge. But are you sure you're ready for the fallout? This will destroy them, and it might destroy you too. I leaned back in my chair, my jaw tight. They destroyed me first, I said. I'm just returning the favor. While Rachel worked on verifying the story, I decided to confront Sarah again. I needed her to know what was coming. To see the fear in her eyes when she realized she couldn't escape the consequences of her actions. I asked her to meet me at our apartment, the one I'd moved out of but still had a key to. When she arrived, she looked like she'd aged 10 years in a matter of weeks, her face gaunt, her eyes hollow. Mike, she said softly, stepping inside, her voice trembling with hope. I'm glad you called. Save it. I cut her off, my voice ice cold. I threw the file onto the coffee table with a loud thud. I know everything, Sarah. 8 months of lies. Hotel rooms. Dinners. You told me you were at a conference, but you were with him, laughing over candlelit dinners while I sat at home like an idiot. I stepped closer, my voice rising with each word. And the pregnancy. You knew when we met at the coffee shop. You lied to my face again. She stared at the file, her hands shaking as she opened it. Her eyes widened in horror as she saw the emails. The receipts, the photo of her and Richard. Mike, I didn't mean for it to go this far, she stammered, tears streaming down her face. Richard, he made me think I had to do this to keep my job. I was scared, Mike. I was stupid. Don't give me that. I snapped, slamming my hand on the table. You wanted that promotion. You wanted the power, the status. You chose him over me, over us. And now you're going to pay for it. I told her about the journalist, about the story that was about to break. Her face went white, and she sank onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. Mike, please. She begged, her voice raw. Don't do this. You'll ruin me. I'll lose everything, my career, my future, the baby. The mention of the baby stopped me cold. My anger momentarily replaced by a wave of nausea. The baby, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You still don't know if it's mine, do you? She shook her head, her sobs growing louder. I haven't done the paternity test yet. I was too scared. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed in the empty apartment. You're pathetic, I said, my voice dripping with disgust. You don't even know whose child you're carrying, and you have the nerve to ask me for mercy? I grabbed my jacket, heading for the door, but her voice stopped me again. Mike, wait, she cried, stumbling after me. I have something else to tell you. I turned, my heart pounding. What now? I demanded. She hesitated, her hands twisting together, then dropped another bombshell. Richard, he threatened me, she whispered. After the gala, he said if I told anyone the truth about us, he'd make sure I'd never work in tech again. He said he'd ruin my life and yours. I stared at her, my mind racing. Richard had threatened her? Part of me wanted to believe her, to see her as a victim in this. But the other part, the part that had been burned by her lies, didn't care. Then you should have come to me, I said, my voice hard. You should have trusted me, Sarah. But you didn't. You chose him. And now you're both going down. I walked out, slamming the door behind me, her cries fading into the distance. But her words about Richard's threat lingered, fueling my resolve. He thought he could intimidate her, intimidate me? He had no idea what I was capable of. I called Rachel that night, telling her about Sarah's confession. That's another layer to the story, she said, her voice sharp with excitement. If we can prove he threatened her, it'll show just how manipulative he is. I agreed, but I wanted more. I wanted Richard to face me, to look me in the eye and see the man he tried to destroy. I was going to take him down, and I was going to make sure he knew it was me. The story broke on a Monday morning, and it hit like a tsunami. Rachel's article, published in Tech Insider, was a scathing expose. Technova's CEO embroiled in affair and embezzlement scandal. Whistleblower husband speaks out. She'd laid out every damning detail. The affair with Sarah, Richard's history of predatory behavior, the NDAs with other women, and the millions he'd embezzled into an offshore account. She included my story, painting me as a wronged husband pushed to the brink by betrayal, but I didn't care about the sympathy. I cared about the chaos it unleashed. Technova's stock plummeted within hours, dropping 15% by midday. The board of directors called an emergency meeting, and by that evening, Richard was forced to step down as CEO. His resignation announced in a terse press release that did little to calm the storm. Social media was a battlefield. Hashtags like #TechnovaScandal and #RichardBennettExposed trended worldwide, with memes and hot takes flooding every platform. "This guy's a predator, lock him up," one tweet read. "Sarah Harrison deserves better than both of these men," another argued. I didn't care what they said about Sarah. She'd made her choices, and now she was paying for them. Sarah's suspension turned into a termination. Technova couldn't afford the bad press, and she was the easiest scapegoat. I heard through a mutual friend that she'd packed up and moved back to her parents' house in Oregon, unable to face the public humiliation. Her social media accounts were deleted, her LinkedIn profile gone, her entire career reduced to ashes. Part of me felt a flicker of guilt. I'd loved her once, after all, but it was quickly drowned out by the rage that still burned inside me. She'd brought this on herself, but the victory felt hollow. The pain was still there, a constant ache in my chest that no amount of revenge could erase. I threw myself into work, taking on more freelance coding projects than I could handle, hoping the exhaustion would numb me. But every night, alone in my motel room, the memories came flooding back. Sarah's laugh, the way she'd curl up against me on the couch, the way she'd promised to love me forever. And then, the image of her with Richard, her arms around his neck, her lips on his. I couldn't escape it. One night, as I sat staring at the ceiling, my phone rang, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mike, it's Richard," the voice on the other end said, smooth and cold, like a snake slithering through grass. I froze, my grip tightening on the phone. "What the hell do you want?" I growled, my voice trembling with rage. "I want to make a deal," he said, his tone infuriatingly calm. "You've done enough damage. I'll pay you to keep quiet. Name your price. Let's end this." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed in the empty room. "You think you can buy me off? You destroyed my life, Richard. There's no amount of money that can fix that." He sighed, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Think it over, Mike. You don't want to make an enemy out of me. I have connections, people who can make your life very difficult." The line went dead, and I threw the phone across the room, my hands shaking with fury. He thought he could intimidate me? He thought he could scare me into silence? He had no idea who he was dealing with. I called Rachel the next morning, telling her about Richard's call. "That's coercion," she said, her voice sharp with excitement. "If you can get him to say it on record, we've got him on another charge." I agreed to set up a meeting with Richard, wearing a wire that Rachel provided. It was risky, but I didn't care. I wanted him to go down hard. The meeting took place in a dimly lit bar on the edge of the city. The kind of place where the bartender didn't ask questions and the patrons kept to themselves. Richard showed up in a tailored suit, his face a mask of arrogance, as if he hadn't just lost everything. "I'll give you $500,000 to disappear," he said, sipping his whiskey, his eyes cold and calculating. "Take it and walk away, Mike. You've already caused enough trouble." I leaned forward, making sure the wire picked up every word. "And if I don't?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. "What then, Richard? You'll ruin me more than you already have." He smirked, leaning back in his chair. "I have connections, Mike. People who can make your life very difficult. I can have you blacklisted from every tech job in the country. I can make sure you never work again. Take the money, or you'll regret it." I stood up, my hands clenched into fists, my body trembling with rage. "See you in court, Richard," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I walked out, the wire burning against my chest, and handed the recording to Rachel the next day. The news story, Technova ex-CEO attempts to bribe whistleblower, hit the headlines 2 days later. And Richard was arrested on charges of embezzlement and coercion. The news showed him being led out of his mansion in handcuffs, his face pale, his arrogance finally shattered. For the first time since the gala, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. He was going down, and I'd made sure of it. But the drama wasn't over. A week after Richard's arrest, I got a call from Sarah's mother, Linda. Mike, I know you don't want to hear from us, she said, her voice heavy with emotion. But Sarah's in the hospital. She tried to take her own life last night. The words hit me like a freight train, my breath catching in my throat. What? I whispered, my mind reeling. She's been struggling since the story broke, Linda said, her voice breaking. The public humiliation, losing her job, the pregnancy, it was too much. She took a handful of pills. But her father found her in time. She's stable now, but she's asking for you, Mike. She needs you. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking, a storm of emotions raging inside me. Sarah had tried to kill herself. The woman I'd loved, the woman I'd hated, the woman who'd broken me, she'd reached a point of despair so deep that she didn't want to live anymore. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let her suffer the way I'd suffered. But another part, a part one thought I'd buried, still cared. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't deny it. I grabbed my keys and drove to the hospital, my heart pounding with a mix of anger, guilt, and fear. When I walked into her room, Sarah looked like a shadow of herself. Pale and frail against the white hospital sheets, and Ford dripping into her arm. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw me. Mike, she whispered, her voice weak. You came. I stood at the foot of the bed, my hands clenched into fists, unsure of what to say. Why, Sarah? I asked finally, my voice hoarse. Why did you do this? She looked down, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't take it anymore, she said, her voice trembling. The shame, the guilt, the hate. Everyone hates me, Mike. I hate myself. I thought it would be better if I was gone. She paused, her eyes meeting mine, filled with a desperate plea. I'm so sorry, Mike. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. Even when I was with him, I loved you. Her words were a knife to my heart, reopening wounds I'd thought were starting to heal. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her she had no right to say that. But the sight of her, so broken, so fragile, stopped me. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said finally, my voice raw. But I don't want you to die, Sarah. You need to get help. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me again. The baby, she said softly. I did the paternity test. It's yours, Mike. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The baby was mine. After everything, the lies, the betrayal, the pain, the child she was carrying was mine. I didn't know what to feel. Joy, anger, fear. All of it swirled inside me, a chaotic storm I couldn't control. I left the hospital without another word, my mind reeling, my heart torn between the past and a future I couldn't yet face. The revelation that the baby was mine changed everything and nothing. I spent the next few days and a days grappling with the news, trying to make sense of what it meant for me, for Sarah, for us. Part of me wanted to be there for the child, to be the father I'd always dreamed of being. But another part couldn't look at Sarah without seeing Richard, without feeling the sting of her betrayal. I was trapped between love and hate, duty and resentment, and I didn't know how to move forward. Richard's trial began a month later, and it was a media circus. Reporters swarmed the courthouse, cameras flashing as he was let in, his tailored suit replaced by an orange jumpsuit, his arrogance replaced by a grim expression. I attended every day of the trial. Sitting in the back of the courtroom, my presence a silent reminder of the man he tried to destroy. The prosecution presented the evidence Tony had uncovered, the embezzlement records, the NDAs, the wire recording of his attempt to bribe me. Rachel took the stand, testifying about the story she'd broken, and I watched as Richard's defense team scrambled to discredit her, to paint him as a victim of a vindictive ex-employee's husband. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the jury wasn't buying Richard's lies. After a 2-week trial, he was found guilty on all charges: embezzlement, coercion, and fraud. The judge sentenced him to 7 years in prison, a longer sentence than I'd expected, and as he was led away in handcuffs, he turned to look at me, his eyes burning with hatred. I met his gaze, unflinching, and felt a surge of triumph. He'd thought he could ruin me, but I'd ruined him instead. Sarah's absence from the trial was noticeable. She was still in the hospital, recovering from her suicide attempt, under psychiatric care. I hadn't seen her since that day in her room. But her mother kept me updated, sending me texts about her progress. She's doing better, one message read. She's asking about you and the baby. I didn't respond, but the guilt gnawed at me. I'd wanted her to suffer, but not like this. I'd wanted revenge, but I hadn't wanted her to lose herself completely. I moved to a new apartment in Oakland, a small one-bedroom with a view of the bay. Hoping a change of scenery would help me heal, I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Ellis, a kind woman with a calming voice who helped me navigate the storm of emotions inside me. "You've been through a trauma, Mike," she said during our first session, her eyes gentle but firm. "You need to give yourself permission to feel everything, the anger, the grief, the love. It's all valid." I nodded, but the words felt hollow. How could I feel love for Sarah after what she'd done? How could I feel anything but hate? I threw myself into my work, taking on more freelance coding projects, working late into the night to keep the memories at bay. But they always came back: Sarah's laugh, the way she looked at me on our wedding day, the way she looked at Richard in that VIP room. And now, the knowledge that she was carrying my child, a child I didn't know if I could love without hating her. It was a constant battle, one I wasn't sure I could win. One evening, as I sat at my desk, staring at a half-finished project, I got a knock on the door. I opened it to find Linda, Sarah's mother, standing there, her face etched with exhaustion. "Mike, I'm sorry to show up like this," she said, her voice trembling. "But Sarah's being released from the hospital tomorrow, and she wants to see you. She's not doing well, Mike. She needs closure, and I think you do too." I didn't want to go, but something in Linda's eyes, the raw desperation of a mother who'd almost lost her daughter, made me agree. The next day, I drove to the hospital, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and resolve. Sarah was sitting in a wheelchair by the window when I walked in. Her face still pale, but her eyes clearer than they'd been the last time I saw her. "Mike," she said, her voice soft, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You came." I stood at a distance, my hands shoved in my pockets, unsure of what to say. "Your mom said you wanted to see me," I said finally, my voice flat. She nodded, her hands resting on her stomach, where a small bump was just starting to show. "I wanted to tell you. I'm keeping the baby," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "And I'm going to get better, Mike. For the baby. And for myself. I've been in therapy, working through everything. I know I hurt you, and I'll never forgive myself for that. But I want you to know that I'll never stop trying to make things right." I stared at her, my chest tight with a storm of emotions. "I don't know if I can be a part of this, Sarah," I said, my voice raw. "I don't know if I can look at you without seeing him. Without feeling this rage." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand," she said. "But if you ever change your mind, I'll be here. For you, and for our child." I left the hospital with a heavy heart, the weight of her words pressing down on me. I didn't know if I could ever be a father to that child. But I knew I couldn't keep living in this limbo of anger and pain. I needed to move forward, to find a way to heal, for my own sake if not for hers. Over the next few months, I focused on rebuilding my life. I started running again, the early morning jogs along the bay giving me a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. I reconnected with old friends, people I'd pushed away during the chaos of my marriage's collapse. I even started dating again, cautiously at first, afraid of being hurt. I met a woman named Lauren at a coding meetup, a quiet, kind-hearted graphic designer with a laugh that made me smile. She knew about my past, and she didn't push me to move faster than I was ready for. With her, I felt a flicker of hope, a chance at something new. One evening, as Lauren and I walked along the pier, the sun setting over the bay in a blaze of orange and pink, she squeezed my hand and said, "You're stronger than you think, Mike." I looked at her, the warmth in her eyes melting some of the ice around my heart. "I'm trying to be," I said, and for the first time in a long time, I meant it. I didn't know what the future held, whether I'd ever be able to be a father to Sarah's child, whether I'd ever fully forgive her, whether I'd ever stop seeing Richard's face in my nightmares. But as I stood there with Lauren, the waves crashing softly below us, I realized I was ready to let go, not of the past, but of the hold it had on me. I was ready to live again, to find happiness on my own terms. The scars would always be there, but they didn't have to define me. Not anymore.